I probably have one of the strangest lives of any SAS programmer I know. I grew up in northeast Brazil. My mom and dad were Baptist missionaries down there. I didn't come to the U.S. till I was about 15 years old. But I've had a fascination with technology since I was a kid. We used to take apart old electronics and try to build things out of it. When I came to the U.S. and finished high school, I talked my way into a mainframe computer operator job at a bank. I worked there for about a year and a half before I joined the Navy. That's where I first got introduced to the concept of programming. Back in those days, we didn't have any fancy languages like SAS. So we programmed in Beat, which is very much like an assembly language. After joining the Navy, I became a nuclear power plant operator and ran power plants on submarines for about 20 years. And during that time, I continued to toy with computers as my hobby. I'd program anything with a keyboard. There was HP calculators that you could program. There was a version of IBM Selectric typewriter that had a magnetic card attachment you could program it with. And eventually, I turned my hand to microcomputers, working on the Apple II and the RS-80, the Commodore 64, Atari 1040 STs, eventually IBM PCs. During my stint in the Navy, I wrote a couple of programs for the Navy itself. I did some shareware work on my own. When I retired from the Navy, I went to work for Newport News Shipbuilding, where I found that they were using a programming environment called SAS on their mainframe to collect data about testing. So I taught myself SAS, and I convinced them to hire me as a full-time applications developer on the mainframe, and I worked in heavy manufacturing at the shipyard for about 5 years before I came to Capital One. Capital One hired me on as their SAS Jedi, so to speak. My job was to help other SAS programmers write more effective and efficient code back in the early days of big data when efficiency was starting to be really, really important. Capital One was like on the cutting edge of using data for decision making and modeling. 2003, I came to work for SAS, and I initially served as the Director of Technical Services for SAS in Latin America and the Caribbean because I could speak Portuguese. And eventually found this job teaching as a SAS instructor, which I have to tell you is the best job I've ever had. So I intend to do this until somebody makes me stop. In the process, I've published several SAS courses. I've written SAS courses. I've written several papers for the SUGI and for SAS Global Forum. I've written a book called Mastering the SAS DS2 Procedure, Advanced Data Wrangling Techniques, which is now in its second edition. And I sporadically post Jedi SAS tips to the SAS Learning Post blog. So that's pretty much my career path so far. Most people in the SAS world have unique paths. They come to SAS from so many different disciplines, and it makes it a fascinating place to work because they all have these different viewpoints on how to solve a problem. Mm-hmm. Every time you get into a discussion in the group, you never fail to learn something. The first tip I'd put out is never stop learning. It's tempting after you've been programming in SAS for several years to become complacent or comfortable with the things that you know. But SAS is a rapidly developing platform. And just because you've been doing something some way for years and it still works doesn't mean it's still the best way of doing it. So don't be afraid to modernize your techniques and to learn something new every day. The second thing I would say for those who want a career in SAS is get certified. Having a trusted third party attest to your technical skills will certainly make you more marketable. It'll give you more self-confidence in your own skills too, to know that you've been validated by someone beside yourself. And finally, I would say get involved with SAS communities out at SAS, communities.sas.com. There's a huge group of people available worldwide. Somebody's on there 24/7. Those people include very experienced SAS users all the way down to novices that know very little about SAS. And SAS staff also on those communities also. You can learn so much in the communities and get answers to SAS questions you have, and you get great satisfaction by helping someone else answer their own question there. So that would be my third. Well, I guess as the guy who wrote the book on the DS2 procedure, I'd be a sad man if I didn't say it wasn't my favorite. I love the new DS2 language. It lets me use all of the things that I learned to do in DataStep in new ways. It has enough object-oriented design behind it where you can easily make reusable code and not worry about ADV contamination and other things that happen when you try to include code in a SAS program. It allows me to do threaded processing right on a base SAS platform without having to have any extra tools. So anything that's compute bound, I can speed up pretty fast and easy. And finally, I love its ability to consume data from external sources at full precision. I like to say that if you want to compute the U.S. national debt right now to the nearest penny, it can't be done in base SAS because base SAS numerics are double precision floating point, and they have a maximum of 16 digits of precision. And unfortunately, the numbers are much higher than that. And it's not just that. In the world today, we deal with these much larger numbers much more frequently. In databases, we've had the decimal data type for ages that can handle much higher precisions than floating point can. Now with DS2, we can manipulate those data types too, including things like varchar. So that's kind of exciting. So the first thing I would say is if you know DataStep and a little SQL, you're going to be really comfortable with the DS2 language. So don't be afraid of it. There's most recent version of the documentation on DS2 has been split up into two. One a language reference, and another one is a programmer's guide. And the programmer's guide is a lot more user-friendly for people who are getting started with concepts and things. Number two, you can use DS2 straight up in any version of SAS 9.4, any of the maintenance releases. So you can do a lot of the DS2 stuff right in SAS University Edition if you want to download it for free and learn about it. And we have, in my blog, you can get at, by the way, at sasjedi.tips, believe it or not. The series of blog posts that I write, many of them have to do with DS2, so they can help you get started with that. And if you want to read about it, of course, I would recommend my book. It goes into great detail about DS2, and it doesn't assume that you know anything about it when you start. By the time you get done, you should have a pretty well-rounded command of that procedure. I have to say that this has been a pleasure, and I thank you for the opportunity. All I have to say is, may the SAS be with you. Stay sassy.